And do we have a quorum? Good evening, everyone.
No, we don't.
Okay.
We need 8 members. If everyone can come on the screen, we now do have a quorum.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Good evening and welcome to the Community Task Force meeting. I'll go ahead and start off with a roll call.
Member Dosty?
Here.
Member Downs?
Hi, I'm here. I can't turn my camera on because my commute is delayed.
Okay. Member Gary?
Here.
Member Hamady?
Here.
Member Johns? Not here. Member Leong?
Here.
Member Locke?
Present.
Member Newton? He is here. Member Newton, you can hear us, right? Okay. Member Oliver?
Here.
Member Wong is not here yet. Member Wright? Not here. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. Looks like we have 2. Have any comment at this time? All right, seeing that there is no public comment, go ahead. Any announcements from staff or task force members? If not, we will go down to line item number 6, which is discussion and possible action on matters related to the following items. 6.1 is the revised resolution for the community task force. So this resolution was revised by one of the council members and brought to the city council for approval. And basically, I wanted to bring it to the task force to have an official vote, just so it's in order that we're in agreement with this resolution, and to see if there was any questions or concerns about it before I have the city clerk do a vote. Go ahead, Chair Dosty.
It's just member now, but I wanted to, it's fine. Ask if you could cover what the changes made were. I've tried to take a look, but I'm not sure I caught all of them.
If Member Downs, are you available? Or Member Locke, is there any way you can go over the resolution and what changes were made and what versus what you presented to the task force last meeting, please?
Yeah, let me try to pull up the document here.
Okay.
If you can just hold on a moment.
No worries, thank you.
Is there any member of the task force that received the amended document or no?
It's under the agenda, but accessing that is a whole new.
Okay, and you could pop that up on the screen, please, so the members can view it, please.
Just a minute. I have it up.
Yeah, thank you.
This is the signed resolution. Is this the one that you want? Or
Is that the one you want? Member Doc Law?
This reflects the most recent iteration. So Member Dosty, is this what you're referring to when you want to know the changes, or?
Yeah, versus what we voted on last time to send. I know that this, they changed the title of it, right, to be the Policing Commission.
Policing Commission from Public Safety. Mhm.
Mm-hmm. And any other changes?
There were. So if we go down, let me see if I can just track the specific changes here. I'm trying to open the document on my screen here so I can scroll through.
Just to confirm, so there was no like document provided with that actually has like amendments on there, or usually if you amend a document, you know, they'll have like a one with strike through or, you know, a different text or something. So is that not the case? We just have to guess what's been put them line by up next to each other. How do you ever vote on an amendment if you just, that seems very inefficient.
There's a red line copy here.
Okay, well, yeah, that would be great if there's a way to access that.
So I don't think there was a version that we saw with red lines, but I don't think it was fully from the red line from the version that we had submitted. I think the specific answer I would say is that what we had, if I recall correctly, is that council voted on a substitute resolution. Council is not required to take our resolutions and amend them. They introduced a substitute that included ours, but also various changes. I wonder if a better use of time, Mayor Gary, is if people, if it is important for the task force to weigh in on the council changes. I mean, if the council establishes the rules of the city, and we don't, but if it is important for the task force to weigh in, and if members have not watched the council meeting where the council members discussed it, if it makes sense to hold off voting until they have had a chance to watch that, because I think it's a difficult position for the task force to explain what council members were doing and the reasoning, since, you know, council members tried to explain that on their own terms.
And I agree that, so the reason for this being brought up, just so that the task members are made aware of, like you said, those that didn't attend the meeting, as you stated, you have the option to watch it and get the material from the city council meeting. I just wanted to make sure we brought it to the task members' attention that this resolution was put forth, and that you know, and you are aware that the resolution that what we voted for was not the resolution that we signed off on. So that was the whole point of bringing this to the agenda, just for transparency's sake.
Well, I appreciate that. Then I see. So if it was a new resolution, then I get why there wouldn't just be redlined. Is there, I apologize that I haven't watched the meeting previously, and I'm happy to do that. I'm just curious if anyone has any sense of was there anything significant that was changed, or you don't feel comfortable assessing that and we should all decide for ourselves?
I mean, you know what, I'll let the members do that. Respond, Member Locke, if you can.
Well, I think going back to what Mayor Gary had said, I think perhaps a more efficient way to conduct this discussion is maybe to have the members who haven't had a chance to review the previous meeting to see exactly the specific changes that were made and the rationale behind them, sort of as some baseline information before going forward. Does that make sense? Or
Yep.
Okay, all right. So again, this was just for transparency to let you know that this is what was put forth. And if you have questions or concerns and you want to address this in our next meeting, we definitely will open up for that. Okay.
If I could just mention to the members, if you want to see the signed version, it is under it's under the city website, albanyca.org. And if you hover over Department City Clerk resolutions, and it is resolution number 2021-100. So if you scroll all the way to the bottom, this is the signed version. And if you like to watch the meeting or see the minutes of the meeting, you can go to the page where you access your agenda, same page. And if you scroll down, you can see the October 4th council meeting, the agenda packet, and also the video is right here. And if you want to see the minutes is included in the October 18th agenda packet under draft minutes to be approved.
Any other questions? No. All right. I'll take it out to the public to see if there's any questions or concerns they want to voice at this time. All right, if not, we'll go ahead and move to line item number 6.2. And it's the Reimagine Albany Public Safety Subcommittee report. And I'll turn it over to Member Oliver.
Yes. So can I share my screen? I believe I can. So I'm just going to present a quick PowerPoint. Hopefully everyone can see this. It's also in your agendas. And then also Member Hamady is going to go through the resolution, which is more detail and more specific as far as what our recommendations are. So this is just kind of a brief overview so everyone can know what our philosophy is and what we were thinking with our subcommittee. All right, so we wanted to start by saying what our guiding values are in our task of reimagining public safety. So our guiding values were justice, equity, and community care. Those were kind of the things that we were focused on and rooted in as we thought about reimagining public safety and what we want Albany community members to experience with public safety and the support that we want them to have. Sorry, it's not. All right. Next, we wanted to kind of clarify what our goal was. Our goal was to proactively implement policy and cultural change that reduces the impact of policing within our community. And we will kind of further elaborate about that on the next slide. So kind of what is reimagining public safety? What was our kind of philosophy and why we chose to do what we did. So first of all, we recognize that policing is inherently violent and disproportionately harms members of marginalized communities, including but not limited to Black, Indigenous, and people of color, people marginalized by gender, LGBTQ plus people, neurodivergent folks, working class, poor, unhoused people, and people at the intersections of these identities. So that means that because of that, we want to divest from policing and invest in community care and life-affirming social services. And so we want to create a world where all community members are safe, supported, and have access to the resources that they need to thrive. Next, we wanted to share our vision. Our vision would be a world with a fully funded, independent Department of Public Safety, so separate from the police, community hotlines, increased mental health services, civilian response teams, restorative justice programming, and more. And then finally, we wanted to talk about implementation. So implementation would include reinvesting in the community, reducing police contact with the general public, and unbundling police functions. And so some of the sub steps of that would be creating a separate Department of Public Safety, as I previously discussed, ending criminalization of poverty and unjust laws, advocating for equitable statewide legislation, demilitarizing the Albany Police Department, and increased accountability. So this is kind of a general overview of our vision with Reimagining Public Safety. And now I will hand it over to Member Hamady to review the resolution.
Okay, well, thank you. I wanted to just first, that was great. I appreciate it. Just wanted to check in. So this resolution is especially long. So I think the last one, maybe we actually read through word for word. I can do that, but I wanted to check in, throw out there maybe as a suggestion that since I think Amelia's already done a good job of setting the foundation and the background, kind of, that I go to the actual changes that we're proposing and skip over the just, you know, hopefully what we're all aware of as far as the context and how we got here.
Are members okay?
So,
Okay, go ahead. No one's saying anything. Go ahead.
okay, yeah, so I can share my screen. So basically what I'm saying is I will just, never shared my screen before. Let's see.
While you're figuring that out, if I would just quickly highlight, because council has recently expressed not being sure that there is a problem with policing, that's why we have this very long whereases section, and the numbers about the different 393 public comments just from June 15th to August 4th of 2020, with at least 100 of them being individual. Those are numbers that I tabulated going through the public comments that are publicly available. And over that 20 public comments calling in on July 7th, 2020, the good of the city. And yeah, just wanting to call out some of the numbers around why this is important.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I appreciate it. And I do remember at least one council member not understanding that there was a problem. And so that is, and given that, I do want to throw out there a request. I think it would be helpful when we do present some iteration of this to the council, if there's anyone either among you or someone you know who could put together some of the highlights that are referenced in the background section of this document, comments made by community members about their experiences with the police. And I think that could be really compelling and will help, especially those who apparently weren't listening the first time and didn't hear it was a problem. So one more time, I think would be nice. And, you know, pictures worth 1,000 words, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we owe it to those community members to center their stories when we present this. So unfortunately, I'm not tech savvy at all. But if there's anyone who has any experience, just basically, we just need to like get a few clips and just loop them together from the previous meetings. But so if you know anyone, ask around, let us know. Okay, I'm going to try one more time to share my screen. See if it. I see. I can choose. Okay, I think you all can see my messy screen here now. Okay. All right, so yeah, I'll jump to discussion. So there's a lot in here, and that's sorry, I do actually want to get to this, but I also want to just throw out there that keep in mind that one of the changes we're calling for, or proposals, is an implementation committee, and so we don't expect that all of this will just magically appear as soon as a resolution is passed. Okay, so given that we are reimagining public safety and in the city, we are, first things first is enacting a hiring freeze on Albany Police Department, because given that things we hope will be changed substantially, it doesn't make sense to be hiring new people when we don't know what we'll be asking them to do. And then, so as Amelia mentioned, we call for the creation of a public safety department. So this would consist of unarmed licensed social workers, psychologists, nurses, and emergency medical technicians. That doesn't need to be an exhaustive list. And I think part of the reason we'll have that implementation committee is, things can be, there's room to add, change, and tweak as we go forward. So the public safety department would be the first responders for all non-criminal incidents. And they would also be the first responders even for potentially criminal incidents, which that's not in what I have that highlighted because I just added that in. That's not in the document that was posted. I have that as a potential suggested change because I want to make it clear that we still, that this would include potentially criminal incidents related to mental health episodes, domestic violence, tenant disputes, parking disputes, et cetera, so long as there is no evidence of a lethal weapon. And we have here that the department staff shall not be trained by the APD, though transfers from that department, since we would be unbundling some of those services, would be welcome to apply to join. As far as traffic and parking enforcement, so police officers would only be stopping drivers when there's evidence of immediate danger to the public, such as reckless driving. So any pretextual stops would be prohibited. Tinted windows, broken taillights, failure to signal, those would all be handled, to the extent that they'd be handled at all, they'd be handled by the public safety department. And then community outreach. Once again, we do want the public safety department to have a good sense of the community that they're serving. So the idea was to transfer some of the police department services to this department, as far as the educational presentations for the neighborhood, bicycle safety, child car seat safety. If police officials really love that part of their job and this proves to be controversial, they're welcome to participate, but they cannot be armed. That the same would go, I don't remember if we include that in here, but so like programs like Coffee with a Cop, if we're going to have people interacting with the community and their police officers, we would, our recommendation is that they not be armed. Same with special event duties, would be transferring out of APD into the public safety department. Albany, like most cities in this country, has a problem with criminalizing poverty and some other unjust laws. So we are also calling for the repeal, or at least we want to cease enforcement of those laws that criminalize homelessness and poverty, such as loitering, camping, soliciting, and you can, there's a whole bunch of them, unfortunately. We also want to end the practice of civil asset forfeitures. Talks about repealing or stopping the enforcement of laws that criminalize the sex trade between consenting adults. And the practice of mandatory arrest and of arrest for failure to protect, ban the issuance of fines or arrest warrants for civilians who fail to appear in court for traffic citation. And we are suggesting that general fund dollars not be expended to pay out settlements resulting from police officer negligence, and that those settlements should come from police department budgets. I also want to just point out that you'll see this document is littered with citations, and you're welcome to check those out. I know from how it went down with the oversight resolution that understandably people want to see check our work and make sure we have sources for what we're articulating, and so we do have that here. We also believe that promoting an equitable community and reimagining policing goes beyond just our city. So promoting similar initiatives or initiatives that further that equitable community in the state. So we call for writing letters and resolutions in support of particular bills. I believe Corey is most familiar with these, and if you're curious about any of those particular bills, I think if it's not too much, I'd point you to Corey after this. But Corey, if I'm wrong, then we need to do more research. That's fine. Programming. So we wanted to make it so that the chief of police no longer has discretion to implement programming without approval from the city, and making sure that we get room for public comment and also recommendations from SEJC. While some of this is sort of implied by our recommendations, the unbundling would also mean there would be no mental health crisis response that goes through APD, no creation of a community academy. We call for ending the subscription to Lexipol, which is that one size fits all policing policy service that many, I think most of California police officers or departments use. We also request that the Albany Unified School District and all Albany schools, public and private, and programs that bring police officers into the school and do everything within their power to protect undocumented students, families, and to safeguard their information and prevent it from being shared with police, including ICE. And I think we do have a good relationship with members of the school board, and I know at least some are supportive of this, and we can continue to reach out to them and make sure that these policies are also kind of reflected in the schools. Technology, remove APD's discretion to select and implement technology without approval. This is similar to the previous one. We just want to make sure that the entire community gets to weigh in on what can be really important decisions. This would also include a comprehensive review of existing technology used by the APD, paying particular attention to data sharing agreements with other agencies. We want to demilitarize APD, remove the SWAT unit, and prohibit training exchanges with global military and policing entities such as Urban Shield. Decrease unneeded responses. So we would adopt a verified response standard for the dispatch of officers to burglary alarms. A neighborhood would have the power to reduce patrols. So giving neighborhoods the power to say, no, we don't really need that in our community. Establishing mutual aid agreements with community groups and residents trained in nonviolence and de-escalation, and require that any outside agency providing mutual aid abide by these new policies around policing in Albany. Accountability. So we are hoping that we're calling for renegotiating the memorandum of understanding between the Albany Officers Association and the city in I guess 2021 as soon as possible instead of 2024. Once again, keeping the public apprised of what's going on. Call for preventing candidates for city council from accepting funding from police unions or organizations. ending the practice of paid administrative leave while under investigation for misconduct. As to suspicious person calls, track and periodically publish reports of suspicious person calls, demographics involved, particularly race, and the actions taken. While APD should attempt to code and track these calls, best practice would be an external non-law enforcement group auditing them. Body cameras, revoke officer discretion to turn them off while notifying subjects they have the option to remain anonymous and stop recording and storing footage. Require footage be stored externally where district attorneys and civilian oversight structure, such as the Public Safety Accountability Commission. I think that might be the synonymous with Public Safety Department. No, this is the Oversight Commission. Sorry. But they would have direct access. And then prevent officers from reviewing footage of an incident before completing initial report statements or interviews about the incident. Prohibit use of footage in tandem with facial recognition software. And as all of this is really about investing in the community. So we are calling for the current proposed police budget for 2022 to be reduced by 75% or greater. And with that money saved, funding all the community programs and non-police city agencies that we are talking about, including the Department of Public Safety. Restore ambulance and EMT transport for 5150 calls instead of the APD or the fire department taking that on. Funding community hotlines and transfer 911 call center out of APD. We mentioned Mental Health First Oakland as one option that could be handled through the Department of Public Safety. Fund mental health services following Oakland's macro principles. Fund civilian community response teams. Remove APD from homeless outreach. Reinvest in mobile street outreach by non-sworn personnel, including potentially Department of Public Safety. Fund re-entry support for those released from incarceration, including a stipend upon release. Fund and expand restorative justice diversion for youth and young adults. Fund school-based violence prevention and crisis intervention teams in conjunction with the school district. Fund and create gender-based violence, domestic violence, and sexual assault services and prevention programs. Fund seeds and similar dispute resolution programs. Fund and create more public restrooms, showers, laundry facilities, and lockers, especially gender inclusive ones. Create community land trusts. Seek out and pay the sorry if I'm getting that wrong, Ohlone tribe for land stewardship, especially fire risk mitigation and species diversity preservation, particularly on Albany Hill. Hire local youth to paint murals along Solano and common graffiti spots. Fund a free public transit shuttle to and from key points of Albany, emulating the Emery Go-Round. Fund internet infrastructure as a public utility. Create an immigrant services center. Hire an access coordinator. So it's quite an ambitious list, and we erred on the side of more rather than less. And depending upon the police do have a sizable budget. So with the funding that will be saved there, we feel like the sky's the limit. As far as implementation, as I said earlier, that's going to be a key point. So we call for creating a Reimagining Public Safety Implementation Committee with a specific charge of implementing these recommendations, and members of the committee would be appointed by SEJC. And then finally, we ask, in case the council sees otherwise and wants to consider some alternatives, we specifically don't encourage any of the following: investing in APD community outreach or engagement, or other community policing strategies that target youth. We do not want to invest in incentives for duty to intervene. We do not want to increase required reporting and thereby increase paid time. And we do not want to invest in increasing police presence in the community. So that is a brief run through. And again, I just want to say thank you to Corey, who did the bulk of the work for this. And yeah, I'm excited about the path ahead.
All right, thank you, Member Hamady. I'll open it up for the members for questions, discussions, and or changes to this resolution. So, you know what? Let's hear from public first before I do that. Okay, is that okay with everyone? All right, we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment, and let's give each 3 minutes, please.
Hi, this is Margie Marks, and I just want to say thank you again for all the work that you've put into this and the great thought you've given it, the detail you've gone through, the research you've done. It makes a huge difference. I also believe it's part of the state labor code that police officers do get paid when they are suspended pending investigation of a more serious crime. So it would take a change in the labor code. I think your list of suggestions is fantastic. It's fabulous. What I would really like to see you do is prioritize them in some way so that we could have, you know, an order of how we want things to happen in the city, because there's so many things here. They're all really valuable. They're probably not going to happen all at one time. And so given all the research you've done and the knowledge that you have on it now, I would hope that maybe you could do a list of what kind of order we should be doing things in. Thank you very much.
Hi, good evening. You know, I'm really happy finally something's going on in Albany other than the police. You know, we need public safety. Because why are police interacting with the homeless when there's when they need housing? And all the police do is go there, shine the flashlight in their eyes and tell them to get up and out of the way and go. We don't need people like that in our community trying to help the homeless. It's so sad. I mean, the people at the library all last year, every time police department went there, I heard all the stories. Police department comes, shine the flashlight in their eyes and tell them to get up and go. How would you like it if you were homeless and that's how you're treated by the police department? You know, I've been treated by the police department. Why do I have over 50 bruises on my body when the police department comes to my house and takes pictures all inside my house? I have 50 bruises on my body from last year, and I don't know which officer it was from. It was from probably about 4 or 5 officers. So I walked to the police department that same day or the next day. Bruises getting worse on my body. I go there, I'm standing out front in my shorts, no shirt, no shoes. And I request them take pictures of my body. I won't name the officer that came out and did it, but they refuse. They refuse my public records request to give me my footage of my bruises on my body. I try to get those cameras to the news. I told the news, and still, police department refuses to turn those pictures over to the news. Why? Because they're hiding something. They know they did wrong. It's called police brutality. What did I do wrong? What did I do to get over 50 bruises up and down my body from head to toe? What, because I called 911 because my wife is unconscious? Police department thought I did it when they showed up. They told me they're taking pictures because it's a crime scene. And then all of a sudden the police department just leave. And I'm like, well, is it a crime scene or not? No, it's not a crime scene, Jeremiah. So I was lied to. Where are all these pictures? Why am I denied access? So the police department's hiding something, and they hide behind this penal code. They give me this penal code that they don't have to give me my public records request if they don't want to. So they don't have to give a public records request when they don't want to, when they're hiding something, but that they don't want to be made public. Because I'll take those pictures to the news, but they didn't want that. Thank you for your time.
Next, please.
Hello, it's Bart Grossman from Albany. I'm a member of SCJC, but I'm not speaking for SCJC. One of the questions I have is if you're creating a Department of Public Safety, wouldn't it make sense for the police to be under that department, to be a division of the Department of Public Safety? The danger, I think, of creating a Department of Public Safety and leaving the police department as a separate entity is that you get competing approaches, fighting with each other. You get two different departments that could be operating in different directions. Whereas if the police were part of the Department of Public Safety, then they would have to work collaboratively with the other entities within that department. And I think you might get a change in police attitudes. I've seen that happen when police work closely, for example, with mobile crisis teams and begin to respect other approaches than the use of force. So I would suggest you consider the possibility of pulling the police in rather than having them continue to exist as potentially a hostile entity while you try to put together a Department of Public Safety. That's going to be difficult. A lot of things are going to have to change, and there's going to be resistance, and there'll be mistakes made. That's inevitable. And you, by the way, you have so many pieces to this. It's very hard to think about how you're going to approach this as one resolution. Seems like many of these pieces need a lot of discussion as to whether or not they're feasible, as to what you mean by them exactly, as to what kinds of people you would get. Because we're a small town, for example, it might make sense to look for generalists rather than specialists, so that you would have, for example, social workers could work on lots of different kinds of problems, so that people could move more easily rather than trying to hire a bunch of specialists. I think you'll have trouble finding enough money to do that. But at any rate, I think this is a good beginning to really thinking differently about public safety, and I support the effort you're involved in. But I think there's more work to be done. And again, I think it would be important to have public safety include all of public safety, some of which is dealing with criminal issues. I don't see why that should be separate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, please.
Hi, I'm not very, I don't have some suggestions. I'm blown away by the length and the depth of this document, and I really, really appreciate what's in there. I agree with Margie that it's really very comprehensive, and it's just exciting to me to see it, what direction it goes, whether you take people's suggestions and put it in order, or listen or take Bart's suggestion. I don't know. I don't have an opinion because it's so much that I'm having trouble taking it in. But I just want to say how much I appreciate. There's so many things in there. The not having police officers be armed when they're engaged with the public, especially with the youth, or any time, most of the time. The whole section on people experiencing homelessness and the criminalization of poverty and homelessness, I really appreciate being in there. I didn't see anything in there about and maybe it's because these were just examples of laws, but I think there's a law in Albany that you can't park a certain size vehicle for certain length of time or between certain hours. So people who are living in an RV, for example, can't do that. And so I'd like to see that included, or like to see it go away, especially because I think that it's a complaint. What I've heard is that it's a complaint-based ordinance, which means that people who live in a house and own a large vehicle, nobody complains about their large vehicle on the street, and so it gets left there. Whereas if you're sleeping in it, then somebody looks out their window, sees you sleeping and complains, and then the police do come. So the whole concept to me of complaint-based policing is, I feel like is a real problem. So I'd also maybe like to see you include that looking at how things get reported and who reports them and why they're reported. I also just wanted to say that I'm sorry that it's been changed to the Albany Policing Commission, because I think the word policing is such a powerful and negative word. And I think you start your document with that. And I really am sorry to see that word being used in any way that could be construed as a positive thing, that your commission shouldn't be about supporting policing. Policing is not what we want people to be doing. We want peace officers, not policing officers. We don't want to be policed. I don't want to be policed. No one wants to be policed. We want to be supported and helped. And I think that the idea of using the word policing or police is in and itself a problem. So anyway, thank you again. I'm so excited that this document exists, whatever happens with it. It would be incredible if the city council just said, wow, this is a great idea, but I don't see that happening. So let's see what does happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, please, go ahead.
Yeah, hello. I'm also amazed at the comprehensiveness of what you've included here, and the time and effort that it must have taken to come up with all this is amazing. One question though, I'm just wondering, when you present this, isn't there some need to have some budgeting included, some kind of, cost for these various things? Anyway, that would be my main question, is what about addressing the issue of cost for the various items? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. All right, looks like that's all of our public comment. I'll go ahead and bring it back to the task force. And if you're ready, we can go ahead and dive in and start making suggestions, changes, modifications to complete this resolution.
Well, I just want to say, sorry, I forgot to raise my hand.
All right, go ahead.
Corey can go ahead.
Okay, if that's all right with you, Mayor.
I'm okay, go ahead.
Okay. Just to respond to the public comments briefly, I'll look into that bit about the labor code. If so, then that falls under the legislation pieces about the state are things that we can't change on a city level because it's governed at the state level. So it is things that affect the whole state, but they also affect us. The Crises Act would give us the funding to create community mental health crisis response and hotlines. Doing away with qualified immunity, we can't do as a city. So those sorts of things. So if suspended paid administrative leave is a California labor code thing, that would just move to that part, but I'll look into it. And I'm very open to, I think I could probably put together a sort of flowchart timeline. I think it is sort of in order of the hiring freeze is first, the creation of a public safety department is second, and then it's putting these things into them. The ending, the unjust laws could be at different points. The legislation, the letters to the state are obviously like probably more current in order to comment in time. But I could do that. And I'm also, this was putting everything on the table, and I didn't know exactly how best to package it. And I know it has to be in communication with the budget subcommittee about budgeting, and I wasn't sure how best to do that. And we didn't manage to meet, and I apologize for that. Yeah, so now we can talk about it and figure out how to, I just want all of these things to be up on the table.
Thank you, Corey. Anyone else?
How do I raise my hand?
Okay, you're good. Go ahead.
Yeah, we didn't, I mean, as part of the budget subcommittee, I'm just curious, are we supposed to be working on in concert with your subcommittee? And because it's going to be expensive to implement all those things. Are we supposed to, that's what we're supposed to be doing? If it is, I never heard anything about it. Because it doesn't have any context unless we have some budget considerations. I as long as I'm blabbing, it is out, all out on the table right now, but would you guess that the task force supports this? That's all. Those
Sure.
two things.
So that's a great question. Does everyone on the task force support this or have any other ideas or suggestions? That's where we're starting at this point. If there's suggestions out there that changes needs to be made, go ahead and let member Darcy or member Hamady know so we can make those changes. But if we're in support of the way it is written, then we can move it forward. We can approve it. But I'm hoping that we have time to open up and have a dialogue on what's needed right now and possibly what it could go to. What is the immediate need to pass, to get council to pass? And then as time goes, as the committee goes, we can, address the other needs as well. So again, I'm leaving it to you to decide what direction you would like to go.
I think member Locke has his hand raised.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So just some initial observations as we go into discussion on this proposal. First of all, just to echo a lot of the sentiments from the public comment, it's obvious that you put in a lot of time and effort in researching this and drafting this. Just some general questions as we move forward in refining this. In considering this really broad challenge of public safety, the law enforcement component is definitely or it is a part of that response, right? And so I want to caution this body going forward with entirely siloing that function away from all the other great things that that you're considering and proposing. So in other words, I noticed in the proposal you mentioned that there's some sort of there's aspects of crossover between potentially criminal activity and other general public safety functions. Nonetheless, I think that there is an important role that the police and public safety can play in public safety as a whole, right? Second of all, it seemed like this proposal it covered a lot of things, right, ranging from mental health to homelessness, reentry, land stewardship. As far as the focus, feasibility, and operation and implementation and operationalization of these things, I think that may benefit from some more focus in terms of what can be done given budget constraints, given staffing constraints, et cetera.
Thank you, Member Long. Member Long, go ahead.
Well, one, I just wanted to say thank you so much for all the hard work that you've done. It has a lot in here, and it must have taken a lot of time. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for doing that. I think some of the comments that I would have made in the budget update, I want to make here, which is our budget and data subcommittee didn't have a chance to meet, but I think we were kind of working in parallel paths. And I think, but I wanted to just make comments about what you've written here. I think there is a question around how do you have an overarching public safety department that has different arms, you know, and you have, for instance, traffic and parking, mental health and crisis response. I think all of these things are arms and they should be working in coordination. So one of the folks was talking about how do you do that in coordination, and you just don't want to have multiple. If we call 911, ideally, 911 is dispatching one person or one department. I mean, I'm sorry, under one public safety department, there's an agreement about who's responding. What I want to say is, and about that, like, we live in this country where, you know, the United States is 5% of the world population, but then represents, I think, 25% of prisoners. And so when we talk about police being a police state, being a police city with a 28% budget, you know, the police budget is 28% of the entire city budget. We are saying that Albany is a police state. You know, that's like our mode of operations. And I would like our direction to be more around public health prevention and decreasing that amount. Some might say that, well, we're just police and we're not the criminal justice system, we're not the prison industry, but it's all connected to one another. And so for us to make a public stance about having a public safety lens rather than a police lens, it feels really important. And so I just wanted to emphasize that feels really true. And I do have some other comments that I've done around the data around crisis response, but I can wait till later. I feel like this feels important for us to discuss. And I might suggest from a process point for our group that we might just want to go over section by section and do like a thumbs up, you know, medium or low, and kind of just check off what are the things that our group as a whole agrees on. Because if we don't do that and we're just trying to vote on the whole thing, then we're not going to get through it.
I agree. Thank you so much. Member Downs?
Hi,
Nope.
I just wanted, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks. Wanted to echo the thanks to the subcommittee for the work in putting together such an extensive document, and that gives us so much to think about and to sort of wrestle with, and also to thank them for that work. I mean, to me, I think thinking about a path forward, I think that a couple of things jump out at me. I suspect, you know, for me, and I don't want to speak for anybody else, there are some pieces of this that seem like where, you know, I could, you know, enthusiastically support, some pieces where I'd want some more information about, some pieces that are harder for me to see at present. So I think some time to think those through is helpful, and not trying to rush to a vote. The other thing that I think would be meaningful is to, at least for the subcommittee, to consider a request to us that does break down into component pieces, not just timelines, but that if, you know, that does allow for members to weigh in on pieces, you know, to support the pieces they want, and support, and to reflect areas where we have unanimity, without, you know, and also to allow for differentiation on other areas without people feeling like they have to vote all or nothing, especially if that puts people in a bad situation. If there is, say, like 90 or 95% or pick some number, you know, that they support, and another, you know, section that they can't, and that really leading to challenging in terms of just a one-time up or down. So I think both time for people to reflect, engage, opportunity for, you know, questions and for follow-up, and at least consideration of some kind of process like that would be useful things to contemplate.
All right, thank you so much, Member Downs. Member Hammond, you go ahead.
So I think first of all, I think the public comments were great and very helpful. And one in particular, I think it was Mr. Grossman mentioning the idea of having the police department actually within the public safety department. And I think that's an interesting one. And I do think, at least from a messaging standpoint, part of what this was about, it's not about punishing the police. It's about saying and police officers have said that, and have said this in their footnotes that allude to this, that they're asked to do too much, and they're asked to do things that they're not trained to do. And so it's not their fault, it's our fault as a community, as a government, to ask them to intervene in situations where they don't have the right tools and they don't have the right training. But it's not about the solution is not to train them into things that, they can't do. It's having people who've been doing this their whole life or their whole career that, are better suited to that. So, one, I just want to say that's why, this is about unbundling. It's not about defunding. You can call it whatever you want, but this is about having people who are skilled in particular areas, doing what's best for community members, using those skills. So if we wanted to have the police department within the public safety department, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with that. In fact, if you take that to its logical conclusion, then the chief of police would not be the boss. There would be someone who's in charge of the entire public safety department who he or she or they would be responsive to, which is quite appealing. So I'm interested in, seeing how others feel about that change. And again, I appreciate the public commenters raising that. I also think there was another comment from Margie or Ms. Marks, I believe, about prioritizing and, incorporating priorities and budget allocation. That's certainly something, we can, once we've met with the budget subcommittee, we can start to lay that out a bit. But I think a lot of that will come out in the implementation because depends on how much data we have access to at the moment. But I think we've gotten some good input, and I appreciate everyone's thoughts.
Thank you. Member Dossi, go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciate the way that you framed that, Member Hamady. This is broad and far-reaching, but that's the state of the police department in Albany right now. It is broad and far-reaching, and they do too much, and they can't do all of it well. And so it is about breaking up who's responsible for what and directing it to folks who have specialized more, right? And there was also a remark about the invest in community being very broad and a lot of different items. And yes, and I don't expect all of those to get funded. And maybe we don't propose all of them anyway, but there is a persistent sense of, well, what else would we spend the money on? We need to fund public safety, so that's police. Oh, maybe it's youth programming, maybe parks, some kind of diversion. There's all these things, and those don't get remembered a lot of the time, which is why having this more comprehensive list, it could be an attachment as a pick from these, the ones that you like, right? All of the formatting stuff can definitely be looked at, I think.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take some of the suggestions that have already been made on how we dive into this resolution. I would caution everyone, just be mindful of your comments and your opinions. Again, our job is to set up the framework for the committee. Whether or not what happens in the city is based on one's opinion. We just need to be cautious of that. That's all I would remind us. So with that said, let's go ahead and go through the sections. I don't know who's going to take notes and go through and try to mark down what we should replace or remove. And then that way we can continue to move this forward so we can have a document. And again, I agree with Member Downs is that this is not a rush through. It's going to take time because it is a lot. So we want to make sure that we include the budget aspect of it. And we'll be able to incorporate that once we have a review of the budget, or at least a presentation on what's in there. And then we can incorporate what is needed in order to get the things that we have listed in the resolution. So with that said, if someone wants to pull it up on their screen, and let's go through the sessions and let's start modifying or making suggestions based on the document on how we can move forward.
I can do that. I can share my screen again.
Thank you.
So if anyone, I mean, so yeah, do you want to,
Go to the items that you're suggesting, and we can just start section by section, just going through. Anyone that has any comments about wording or anything, just feel free to jump in and make a suggestion. And if you can, remember, Hamidi, go ahead and update the document so it can reflect the suggestions that are being made by the committee.
so yeah, I mean, I guess if it's okay with everyone, unless there's something in the introductory background section that you really feel strongly about, we could just go to the first section, which is staffing. If anyone has any.
And feel free to unmute yourself and speak. If you don't hear anything, just go to the next section.
Okay. So then the creation of the public safety department. If anyone has anything, I think that would probably be the section where we would mention whether the police would be in that department, and whether there would be, whether the chief of police would have, you know, a supervisor of the public safety department that they respond to. And any other thoughts?
Well, quick, could we return to staff in just a second?
Okay.
What about union considerations? I mean, if we wanted to eliminate the police department tomorrow and create a public safety department, is that possible?
Yeah, so I mean, right there.
Or they have contracts or?
Yeah, we'll have to, I think that it depends on what their agreement is as it stands. And I don't know, you know, there's a difference between, you know, firing someone, which would obviously come with a whole bunch of procedures and procedural protections, versus just, we no longer have this department, or this department is now 1/10 the size it was. We'd have to see what their MOU is. And I'm sure, don't get me, I mean, that's why there's going to be an implementation committee. There's no way like we're going to say that this funding will be cut by 75%, and therefore the following people will no longer be employed. And then that's the end of it. So that there's attorneys will have to get involved, I'm sure, and the city attorney will have much to say about this. But I think our position here is not to try to, even though I'm an attorney, I'm not an expert on city budgets and police departments, is not to try to presume what legal hurdles might come up, but to say what would be the ideal, and then take from there. You know, I can assure you the city attorney and others will weigh in with all the reasons that we don't, that it's going to be difficult, or that something such and such is politically not feasible or legally impermissible. My personal feeling for this document is more, what do we want? If it's obviously impossible, sure, I'm of course, we don't need to put something in if there's no way it can be done. But if it's just that, oh, well, wouldn't that be complicated? Well, yeah, it will be. And so, but I don't think we can possibly I don't think we can include all those complexities here.
Okay.
I agree with you that it is complex.
Okay, and I'm glad we're, you know, trying for the most, and it'll be difficult, but all right.
I just want to add that I'm just looking at the 2021 police budget, and the authorized positions, it's a total of 37.8 FTEs. And then what's filled as of 2021 is 28.8 FTEs. So So I think, and my understanding of the budget is they allocate for the full 37.8.
That's correct. And the city can at any point choose to renegotiate the MOU, which is why we advise that it be bumped up instead of waiting until 2025. And a city can completely disband their police department. That has been happening around the city, around the country. That is, the city employs these folks, even though they're unionized. You can entirely get rid of that job if you want to.
So I'm just gonna suggest, do we have any, if we don't have any questions on one, could we just do like a straw poll of where we stand on it? And if we don't have an issue, or we know at least where we all stand, then we can just move to the next one.
All right. Kimmy, if you want to call that. So 1, any issues about staffing, any changes on that section or in that section? Wording. All right. Go ahead.
Proposal is if you're fine with the wording, then you do a thumbs up. If you're unsure, you do a medium, and then if you don't like it, you do a thumbs down.
Are we all doing it at the same time?
Well, I can see you as long as the document is up. So how about this? If this ayes, just do a vote. Everyone that's in agreement with staffing the way it is, the wording, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right. What's the next one?
All right, I'm gonna highlight that in green then, because it's as good as gold. And now, section 2 was the creation of the public safety department. So the one thing I already pointed to that I think we need to decide is whether the police department would be within the public safety department or separate from. And there's also, obviously, anyone can bring up other issues as well.
I didn't catch this during edit, I'm sorry, but I would amend A actually to say at the end, and otherwise non-sworn, non-police personnel, or something like to that effect. I think it needs to be clear that no actual police officers should be hired into this section of the public safety department.
Anyone else?
Well, what does it mean to fully fund?
We could remove that. I mean, it'll ultimately, right, putting that in there isn't going to mean, oh, that we have to fully fund it. It's in the resolution. So, I mean, that'll come out more in budget. So I'm happy to cut it.
I might suggest that you combine A and B together in some ways, because the functions of that are described in B feel important, and then the staffing is A. You have the basically a mental health and emergency medical arm of the public safety department, and you can also have a police arm. But the functions and the concept is of what's described in B. It feels like that's what you're wanting to create in terms of a public safety department.
I agree with what you said, but I'm not sure how you were proposing it be changed. Could you say that part again? Was it reordering or?
Or like A would be, the city would create a public safety department whose primary purpose is to be the first responder, or is to be the with a priority to first responders to all non-criminal, you know. So I'm not, I'm just saying like that should be the focus of public safety, that the principle under that is non-criminal incidents should be responded with a with more of a focus on mental health. And then maybe an add-on is here is when there might be, you know, we would have to write down some agreement about when, what's the function of the police.
Right. I've been thinking about if the, I think under invest in community, it mentions moving 911 out of the police dispatch control into a community run sort of control. And I think it might belong here, so that the public safety department as this top level controls, okay, now do we let the police handle something, or do we send one of our arms? I think that might be here. And that is very important that it be moved away from the police, because police are going to want to prove themselves useful. And they are useful. And we do want them to be able to do things like respond to bank robberies and to maybe respond to shootouts. And there are things that we're going to want to use the police for, yes. But there's a tendency of police to want to go out and do everything, especially if they hear, oh, I think he might have a weapon, even if it's a toy gun, even if it's a pen, right? And the police show up and they're not equipped to handle that, but they want to because they're there. So having a non-police trained dispatcher is really important. Having a public safety dispatcher who can then decide, okay, now the police can't handle this one.
Which I think kind of reminds me why we didn't have the police department within the public safety department, because it's just going to get so difficult to make sure that the two don't bleed together. And I also don't even like, I feel like including it would be is in a way, like I thought of it as like a compromise to, you know, make, and yet I don't even think it would work that way, because it would require a director of public safety. So the chief of police isn't going to like that. So I wonder if the costs and benefits don't even, yeah, I think, sorry, I'm rambling, but I'm now thinking we should not, that for now, the police department should be separate. And to the extent that it's ever entertained as being merged within, then there has to be a whole nother section outlining exactly like what, you know, could be done by the police department. Whereas now it's already sort of implied because they're not part of it.
And I like what Dosti said about adding like maybe 2 is the piece about 911 and public dispatching as number 2. And then 3 becomes the creation of the public safety department.
Yeah, and I'll just say from my research, public safety departments either were just another name for a police department, or when created with this intention, were completely separate from the police department. Those are the 2 models that I've seen done. So I haven't seen we're creating it with this intention and the police are under it. I've not seen that executed. I do see that there is public comment because we're going really long, and just wanted to bring that to your attention. You're still muted, Mayor.
Sorry about that. Let's finish this section here, and then I'll open it up for public comment before we go to the next session.
I do have a question on this section 2A. You enumerate some specific instances when the proposed department would be the primary responder or the first responder, including mental health episodes, domestic violence, et cetera. With the exception of incidents involving lethal weapons, is there also a provision that would permit police to respond to incidents where perhaps a lethal weapon is not involved, yet there is a significant physical threat of violence, say? And is that something that you envision this entity responding to? Or would that be the purview of the police?
I think that's a good point. I mean, yeah, I just added it or imminent threat of violence. I mean, obviously there's there could be some ambiguity there that could, but it's true, we're not going to have time. Just like we're saying, we want people to be trained in particular. We don't want to ask social workers to handle explosively violent situations that we knew were, even if there wasn't a gun or whatever. So I think that's a great point. I did just add so involving lethal weapons or other imminent threat of violence. That helps.
Right, and I think this is where the dispatcher is really key, right, in assessing what, yeah, and it's a hard question, yeah, but I agree.
Just to follow up, the next part of it says, so it says imminent threats of violence, then it says the department. I think that means the public safety department shall handle incidents, and then it says domestic violence. And so I'm not certain about, how to square that with what came before, right? I'm wary of a proposal where we seem to be underplaying the seriousness of domestic violence.
Right, but we also know that police are not the best to respond to domestic violence, and they frequently make it much worse. So we do have the safety to.
Please be mindful of the comments, please.
My community knows. Sure.
Well, others have their hands up. I just want to say to Member Downs, I think at least as a matter of language, it doesn't make sense. So I changed it to domestic disputes. But I understand there's also a bigger issue you're mentioning.
Member Downs, is your hand still up?
Sorry, I'll lower it.
Member Long, or Member Law?
Well, I used to work with Advanced Peace, the program that used to be in Richmond, and now it's expanded. And I feel like as we're talking about public safety department, the program in Richmond, it used to be called, or is called, the Office of Neighborhood Safety. I think we're talking about a paradigm shift. And in Advanced Peace, the idea is even around gun violence or gang violence, what we're really wanting to focus on is conflict de-escalation, not using, we don't always have to consider using the police as the first. And my fear, if we're not really clear even amongst ourselves around when a public safety is going to be called and when a police is going to be called, then we're going to be, it's going to be a mixed message. So I just have a little bit of apprehension about, I just want us to be clear about what we really mean when we talk about some of these things.
I just have continuing questions to how 2A is phrased, and maybe this is something that'll be worked out in the proposed implementation committee. But nevertheless, I think that these are some significant concerns. When we talk about incidents involving lethal weapons or other imminent threats of violence, are we also perhaps, or would it be prudent to also include situations, perhaps not of imminent threats of violence, but that are escalating towards or the potential violence? That's just a question. And the last sort of category that's listed here is issues on school grounds. Do we want to be that broad, or was that the intent, to be that broad to totally exclude a police response from issues on school grounds, even those that may perhaps pose serious safety risk? It's just a question if that was the intent.
So, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, it is. We are excluding police from all situations other than those that involve lethal weapons or an other imminent threat of violence. So at school, those same standards would apply. I mean, I'd even want it to be, to the extent that it could be enforced more, that we could be more strict about when police come, on school grounds. But I just want to say, I know it sounds kind of like a cop-out to keep mentioning the implementation committee, but I think something like the guidelines under which the 911 dispatch would now operate. I mean, I would expect that to be, a 50 to 100 page, maybe more, 1,000-page document that, is, I mean, that job will potentially be, the most important job in the city. So I'm not saying that we, I think these are good points, but I just don't, I think especially since we don't have, this is non-binding, these are our recommendations. I think we should be clear on what we mean, but I don't think we can anticipate every or anything close to the number of situations where there may be ambiguity. So I think focusing on, we can discuss whether, my view would be to leave it at imminent threat. We can have a discussion about whether it should include, instead of imminent, potential threat. That I would prefer imminent, but as far as like getting into the nitty gritty of what, how it would operate, I think that would be difficult. I also just want to say I really appreciate, I mean, de-escalation should be a part of the police department as well, of course. And that to this, we haven't, that's not part of our focus here. And as it's already been pointed out, it's quite broad already. But I certainly wouldn't be against, even in potentially lethal situations, shifting the paradigm there as well as to the tactics that would be used. And so I'm open to that, but.
Remember down.
Yeah, just quickly, sorry, again with the camera. So I definitely hear that that member Hamady raised the challenge of trying to find the right balance between a principle and a detail. And I think, that there's, arguments for both, for either. I think sometimes the document reads as both, and I do think it's worth thinking about what would be gained and lost by, following what I think I just heard Member Hamady suggest of thinking about articulation of principles. So these long including statements do read as signaling this is not principles, this is details, and those also, then read as both, meaning implying more clear-cut, answers on those details, and also implying things that are not left in aren't included. And I wonder if that's, in either case, if that reflects the subcommittee's goals, that this both be exclusive and also that it be more rigid in terms of what, of if something is listed and included, then it's always included. And in general, I just wonder if some of these pieces, if they're the pieces that are gonna depend upon an implementation committee, if we're better off asking for a council to weigh in and ideally commit to the principle rather than giving them a sort of mix of things that can signal, at times that we're asking for principle, at times that we're asking for a more detailed list. I understand the impulse for a detailed list, but I do think it will undermine the idea that what this is asking for principles that'll be implemented by a further committee.
Thank you, Member Downs. Anyone else? All right, I'll go ahead and open it up for public comment.
Mayor, are we still doing 3 minutes? They've already had a chance on this item, so are you keeping it at 3 minutes or?
Yeah, that's fine.
Hi, this is Bart Grossman again. If you permit me, I just wanted to make a little comment about your process, because watching sort of as an outsider, and that's what I'm trained to do, is look at groups. So I think that this is an enormous change. It's very broad, and it's going to be very interesting to see how it moves through. But it seems to me this is the first time you as a group, a total group, are coming to get grips with it. It's probably not the time to be wordsmithing and working out all the details. It seems to me it's the time perhaps to go through, see if you're agreed in principle, but also identify where are the conflicts and where are the issues and where are the questions that people have, and really list all of those and not try to solve all of it tonight. Let the committee go back and do some work and other people do some work. The other thing I think you're going to have to think about in terms of your process is where is the community on this? There are a few of us who show up at meetings. There were a few hundred people who had something to say a year ago, but there's 20,000 people in the community. How are you going to hear from them so that when this goes to council, there's a sense that people are in favor of it or are not? So I'm just suggesting that maybe you want to focus tonight on identifying issues rather than wordsmithing. And some of them will need discussion. Like I'm holding on to myself to not get into a discussion about why it would be a good thing to include the police in the public safety department. There are obviously pros and cons, and it's a big question, and it's not something you ought to try to solve tonight in 2 minutes. There really ought to be time to talk about what would it mean, how would it be different. Yes, it hasn't been done before. That doesn't mean it's a bad idea. But I won't go into a litany about why you should try that right now. I think that the important thing is give yourself some time and to see what needs to be done here, and think about how you're going to present this to council. I think the idea of focusing on the principles is perhaps a good way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Bart, for your comment and suggestions. Next, please.
Hi, good evening, Madam Mayor and Policing Task Force. This is Jeremiah. So basically we want to transfer the 911 calls away from the police department. I'm not sure that's 100% good idea. What if there's a fire and now there's a delay? Who's going to be getting those 911 calls in case it's a real emergency? Also, situations, domestic violence, neighborhood public safety department would be great. So right now, I called the Albany Police Department, and they got one dispatcher on duty right now during this meeting. And I'm pretty sure we're supposed to have 2 dispatchers on duty at all times. So I'm wondering what's going on with that, because Kensington Police Department pays Albany Police Department, what is it, $250,000 every couple of years to dispatch. So now we're dispatching Kensington. So just remember that Albany Police Department receives Kensington phone calls. So if you're going to transfer this 911, you're going to be getting phone calls from Kensington as well. So are we going to be responding public safety for Kensington? So just keep that in mind. Also, we do need to create our own dispatcher if we're going to do this, that maybe works side by side with the other dispatchers, plural. So we need to figure out what's going on with the dispatcher. There should be 2. There's money coming from the Kensington Police Department to create jobs in Albany, to hire extra dispatchers. Where's that money really going? There's got to be some checks and balances. That's it, I think.
Thank you so much. I believe that's all the public comments. I'll go back. Looks like number 9, go ahead, please.
Yeah, my suggestion was the 911 call center is the one that's dispatching to who it should go to. And, going back to the example of Richmond, Richmond Police and the Office of Neighborhood Safety, they have a common goal, which is to decrease homicides. So I want to just emphasize that the dispatch is not like there's a dispatch for the public safety and it's separate from a police. Like, that's only going to cause chaos. I'm suggesting that we have a one 911 dispatch, and they're trying to coordinate, but they're operating under the principles of less force is best first.
All right. Anyone else? So for the sake of time, we'll go ahead and finish up this section 2. If there's not any comments, we could dive into section 3, but I think we want to stop and give you the opportunity to digest the information that has already been presented. And then at our next meeting, hopefully the Budget and Data Subcommittee and the Reimagine Committee had a chance to speak and kind of incorporate some of the numbers, so this document could really be live and ready to present to council. Does that sound like a plan? Yes, no, maybe so.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think we can also, we can decide. I mean, so I inserted this phrase, including but not limited to. And, that can be inserted throughout where there are specific examples. But I also think that I wouldn't be opposed to removing all of the, well, I don't know. There are a lot of places where the specific examples are really helpful. So I'm not sure I can make a blanket statement, but for, for this particular section, my preference would still be to say including but not limited to, because I just have a feeling that the council is going to take a narrower view, and the more examples we can include, the more we can make our intent clear. But I understand some of the discussion around principles versus details. So that would be my preference, is to including but not limited to.
All right, any other comments before we move on? The charge is now for the members to, look at it, digest it a little bit more. Member Lung, I see you. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just wondering, what's the best way to give input if we're not in a shared committee? That like for us to just, is there a way for us to give like a, here's, if it could use some just minor or some dodging, then it's still a go, but what are things that are a no-go that we would be able to give comment, or just an email to somebody? And so it gives the Reimagine Public Safety Subcommittee something to work on, like what could be presented to City Council at the next meeting.
So, and can the email go directly to you and you disperse it through the task force?
Like previous email that comes in to me, I will load them up on the website and let the committee member know that they're there.
All right. Any other questions before we go down to the budget subcommittee report? All right, with that said, we'll go ahead. Each member has the opportunity to look at this document, dive in, make suggestions, and send to Anne, and she'll let you know when the information is available for everyone to review. That said, we'll go to line item 6.3, which is a budget subcommittee report.
I'm happy to just report back some of the things that we talked about. At the last meeting, we made a request for police data, and then also we had some questions around the budget, and I just wanted to at least report some of that back to the members here. You know, the police, what I should say is part of the reason why we as a community task force was meeting was to see if we could review some of that police data. And so what I would say is that to review non-existent data or very limited data is pretty disappointing. What we got back from the chief of police was the repeat of the presentation that he had presented to our community task force. And so basically, the answer was, yes, we are collecting RIPA data, but then we don't have any data to report back, except that it'll be ready in February of 2022. So I want to just put that on record that feels really disappointing, because then I hear from the Reimagine Public Safety Committee that just in 2 months alone in 2020, there were 393 complaints. And yet what the link that the chief of police gave us around open justice for DOJ for complaints for 2020 was 4. So there is a discrepancy between what the police is saying that they're putting on the DOJ open justice database even now, and then what the Public Safety Committee actually looked at in terms of the specific details of public comments. So it just feels unreliable and untrustworthy. If the city council has been asking us time and time again for, like, let's look at data, we don't have any data that is reliable from the police that we can actually present back. So I just want to put that back out there, that that's the case. And that feels disappointing. And then around the budget, we had some questions around the budget, and the finance administrator was able to present back some of the budget as a report, though we didn't have a chance to meet with her. What I would say is that one of the questions that we had was, if the actual expenditures for, let's say, what's approved for 2021, how, or even let's just say the previous year's budget, the actual expenditures there was a discrepancy of what was spent and then what was allocated for the next fiscal year. And if I could just do like a report back of my understanding of the budget, they have to allocate for the full amount of authorized positions at the top salary. So that's why there's this discrepancy between what's filled and what's the actual expenditures, and then what's the allocated amount. I think the discrepancy was more than $1 million. So from a, I can't remember what the strategic plan value is for the city, but one of the values is around like good financial administration. That yes, I understand from a city perspective, you have to allocate for the full amount, but if there is going to be if there's going to be a discrepancy, and I'm sorry, what's the word I'm trying to use? If you already have too much that you're spending, over expenditure, then you would want to be looking more prudently at how we're spending our money. There's a 28% of the police budget is directed to the police, of which I'm doing an estimate, but it's about 11 to 12% overtime. So these are things that I just wanted to note as here's a discrepancy between this is what this city council is saying is a value, that there's transparency, that there's prudent financial spending, and then when it comes to police, then we just say we're just gonna whatever they ask for, we're gonna do. When what we're hoping for is from, I think the two principles that we're playing around with, one of them is around the idea of data-informed public health approach that is also cost-effective and cost savings to the city. And that means that you're going to have to address the underlying causes and factors of violence and crime, and be looking at mental health, and be looking at prevention, and be looking at housing and economic stability. So it's not a focus on police. I think that those are the main comments that just from the data that we received that we were able to analyze, and we're also willing to work more closely with the Reimagine Public Safety Subcommittee. The last thing I would say is I think we should play around with what is the ideal percent of a police operating budget versus a public safety department. And that's something that I would actually love for our group to even discuss if we have the time to do. And then to look at what are the models of how that works. The city of Oakland, the budget subcommittee worked with if there was a 50% reinvestment of police dollars into community reinvestment, what would that look like? And it was focused on prevention. I had one more comment, and what was that? Yes, when you look at both Berkeley and at least Berkeley and San Francisco, they are funding their mental health crisis response with COVID dollars. So it's one-time only dollars, and they're piloting. So it's not like anything is lost currently, but they're piloting this use of one-time only funds to then see how feasible this is. And if it's feasible, then we're not like doing this pitting of police and safety versus a new thing. That might sound very scary for some people, and that's why these one-time only dollars seem like a very reasonable thing to do, instead of us just asking, hey, how do we want to spend our COVID dollars? Actually, there's a commitment there could be a commitment from the city council to use these COVID dollars to spend it on a pilot of something that people in the community want. So that's my pitch of what I'm hoping that we could do, you know, and not think like one or the other, but we can kind of phase in both.
Thank you, Member Long. Any comments from the task force about the report or even questions? So Member Long, is there anything different you think you could do in your approach to get the information that you would need to make an informative decision on how to bring this to the council as well as part of the Reimagine policing?
You know, I think that's why I wanted a discussion around even what is our, you know, I heard from the Reimagine Public Safety, 75% reinvestment. Maybe we could even have a discussion in our group. What makes sense? How do we, what are the opportunities? What are the models?
And as far as presentation, I believe last task force meeting, you also requested that there be a presentation of the budget. That way you can get clear understanding of what is being allotted. What happened, or is that request still on the table, or did that happen?
Yes, the finance administrator sent the report and suggested that if we wanted to meet with the finance administrator, we would have a private meeting where she would go over the budget, but that they weren't offering to come back to this group. And I don't know if people here want her to come and present, but that's a question.
Okay. All right, if there's no questions from the committee, I'll see if there's any public comments. And it doesn't appear to be. All right. Well, thank you so much, Member Wong, for your report. And with that said, any new agenda items that you would like outside of the Reimagining Police Safety Subcommittee come back with a final report? Is there anything else that we would like to ask the city to bring forth, or anything you need from the city that you would like to have prior to my adjourning this meeting?
Well, what do you think about the request to possibly consider using some of those COVID dollars for piloting some parts or components of the public safety?
Well, I think if your subcommittee is able to frame it in a way to present it to the council, you know, out of the five of us, that'll be something that we can, you know, review and possibly take under consideration. As you and everyone on this task force know, that, you know, it's all about presentation and implementation. So if we present this, what are the needs of the community? How do we assess that? And how do we know what particular need versus another could benefit from the fund? So if it's presented in a way where we've identified what that need is and the amount of money that could be utilized for that, I don't see how it could be not useful for the city and the community.
Right. I did have a chance to speak with the City of Berkeley mental health director, and just want to share with the group here that if we were to contract with the City of Berkeley, that's more funding feasible than fully funding something ourselves, since we're so small as a city. So we would be paying for a portion of that. And Berkeley being the closest to us in Alameda County versus Alameda County's separate program, which is the CAT program. I'm forgetting what CAT stands for, crisis something something, but it's a pilot, or it's a combination of emergency medical technicians with Bonita House, but they're really only servicing San Leandro, Oakland, and Hayward. And so for us, so that seems farther south than we really would want, because in terms of a crisis response, we'd want something, pretty close. So
Right.
I'm at least just sharing with you what I know, since my background, I used to work for a health department. I'm also just, putting it out there that if there are any ideas, especially from SEJC, of folks that have been thinking about the mental health crisis response and the conversations that have happened with either the city of Berkeley or with Alameda County, I'd love for just to even understand the, what's really feasible before proposing something.
And I agree. I think that's something that we could explore. And, it's always, I think as a small city, we should be able to stand alone. I know we're small with limited resources, but I think if we put the right amount for the service need for our city, I don't see why it's not possible for it to happen here. And we fund the program or the resources ourselves. Any other last comments? Nope. All right. Well, I would like to thank everyone for your time. It was a great meeting. Hopefully you'll be able to review the document that was presented from the Reimagining Subcommittee and give some thoughts and ideas, suggestions. So the next time we meet, we can finalize everything and bring it to council for approval or at least discussion. All right. With that said, have a good weekend and I'll see you next month.